I went to Saget as a guest. I was invited by Mr. John Upton, who helped bring Isidore and other kids back to America. And when I published a story about Isidore in 1992, August, John read it and called me up and says, "I'm going next month. I want to take you with me as my personal photographer and helper." And so I agreed. And he had arranged flights, and he had already arranged the filming of his arrival with ABC News 2020. So I went independent. John was already over there, and I flew over to Romania. It was a long flight, a very difficult journey in a way, because it was constant travel. Getting there required me to meet John in Debrecen, Hungary, for maybe half an hour. And then he says, "This is your driver. You're going off to Baia Mare, and you'll meet Colin." And Colin was a fixer, was helping John get medical visas and so forth. So I took this 6-hour drive in the middle of the night with a Hungarian man I could not speak to because of the language. And I arrived in Baia Mare. And as soon as I met Colin, after a sleep, we drove around the country for 1 week, trying to find visas and get secure things. And I was basically observing Colin's behavior for John and making sure he was doing his job, as well as photographing. And then we came back to Budapest. We came and got the ABC crew at the Budapest airport. And then we drove all the way back to Szeged. And we stayed at a hotel in Szeged. And this was also fascinating to me because it happened so quickly, is we went into the hospital at 6 a.m, just kind of bullied our way in a way. So the guard was tired and sleepy, and he didn't know what was going on. And the film crew and myself and John and the producer and the reporter kind of did guerrilla style reporting. We walked in and started filming right away. And so the first thing I saw were kids waking up and nurses, kind of helpers, wondering what's going on. And people are, and I'm holding the light for the cameraman so he can film. And I just remember seeing the cots where Isidore's room was, and the kids rubbing their eyes and scratching, and then some of the helpers changing the sheets because they wet the beds. The smell was not very good. It was a lot of urine smell. And it was cold. This was like late September. And so it was very cold. And I was shocked because, I mean, you see these kids in these cots, 12 to 15 in a room. And the biggest shock, I think, was when we saw them get fed breakfast and how cold that room was. And it's in my book, the photograph of the table, and everybody's praying kind of, or trying to pray, but they're just shivering, they're cold. And John and I and the news crew had jackets on, nice warm jackets, and the kids had rags, just rags. And the window was single pane, so the cold draft air was coming through the walls and the windows, and it was really, really quite cold. And then that's when I met and saw Elena for the first time, and she's the girl with the backward leg. And I took photographs and helped the crew. And when she started having a tantrum and banging her head against the wall, like hammering a nail, it was loud, it was crazy, and she was really in pain, obviously. And and everybody else is covering their ears because of the noise and the screaming. And it was very, very difficult to experience. I photographed migrant camps and laborers and stuff in Southern California working farms, but nothing of that. And I've seen the camps, and where the migrants live, and they're not very nice, but there's no abuse going on. There's no poverty. I mean, they're singing and drinking beer and having tortillas and stuff. And these kids are just shaking, and they just get 1 inch of gruel and a little piece of bread, and that's it. And so we kept filming, and I kept photographing, and then we took a break, and I was assigned to I had a free hour or two, and that's when I walked around the orphanage or the building for a bit, and that's when I was able to photograph on my own without anybody observing me. And every time I walked into a room, the kids would just like run up to me, and then you want to kind of touch them, but you don't, because you don't know where their hands have been and everything else. And they would climb up my leg, and then you almost want to hug them, but then they push you away like this because of their detachment disorders. And that was heartbreaking. And I taught high school for 22 years, and to see these staff trying to control these children was sad, because the kids are loud and they're really not learning, and they try to have discipline, but they don't. And so I could not see any joy, other than they did smile when we came as Americans. We kind of gave them a different attention. We were new novelty for them. But boy, it was a challenge to see them, just running around with, with rags on and shivering and, picking their nose or crying. And the little ones, you go in one room and they're just rocking back and forth, back and forth. The idea that these kids had no support system, and the staffers that I witnessed, they cared, but they can leave and the children cannot. And so there was definitely a sense of prison. They felt like they were incarcerated, and they had no concept of what the world was like outside of a Dallas TV show or something like that. And so the idea of abandonment really didn't occur to me. Is more like I was drawn to the families that adopted them, because it took a lot of courage to adopt these children. And so I wanted to photograph that and see how they would react to having new parents. And so that was a challenge. I myself lost my father when I was just a little boy. And so I made that parallel with Isidore. He found a father when I lost mine at the same age, roughly. And so I was kind of interested in seeing how that bond would grow and be nurtured. So that felt like that was a nice thing. So as far as the abandonment issues, that I just don't know if there's a word. I just felt sad. You just feel sad that there's no one that cares for them, and you want to do something, but then the moment you do something, then you can get sucked into it, and then it changes your whole life. And so you kind of have to put your distance off. The camera, a lot of photographers feel like it's almost a shield. Just when you're in the media, you have this protection because you're on the job, so you kind of disassociate because you're concentrating on composition and technical things as well. And when you are photographing these children, uh, you have to kind of step back and just say, okay, I'm a witness. Well, I can't do much about it, but I can at least document it for the sake of history or a story. But I can't fix the problem other than publish it and get more awareness, and then you get people donating time and money and resources to help change things. So I saw myself more as kind of just that person in between where I could help fill the gap and get some help for these people.